Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you once again, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who joined today's OPC Router webinar training about scripting. With me is my colleague Jan, who will do the training. My name is Torsten. I will give a very short introduction about what OPC Router is, just for those of you who have never worked with OPC Router or seen the software before. But this will be a very short introduction, as said, because this is a training webinar and not a marketing or sales webinar. Okay, before we start, once again, thank you very much for your participation and your interest and for dialing into that webinar in time. This session will be recorded, as you might have noticed. So if you don't like to be on a recorded session, you still have the opportunity to leave the session now. Otherwise, this gives us the opportunity to send you a download link for the session afterwards. So if you would like to review today's webinar or share it with your colleagues, then please just let us know and send us a quick email to sales@inray.de, just requesting the recording of the session, and we will send you the download link for that recorded session of today later that afternoon or tomorrow. And also, please mute your microphones and your camera just to avoid background noises and also to ensure optimal performance for Jan's live presentation after the few slides I will now start with. So yesterday, I told my colleagues we will have a scripting webinar today, and I was expecting that this is a very specific webinar. So scripting is not for everybody, and it's a very, very specific topic. So I was not expecting too much participants today's session, but as it seems, we have more registrations than ever. So we will break a record today. And I was totally wrong yesterday when I thought scripting is not for everybody. So it seems to be a very hot topic. So I'm really looking forward that Jan will give you a look inside of how to do scripts inside of OPC Router. As said, just for those of you who have never heard of OPC Router before, a very, very quick introduction. So what is OPC Router and what is the software doing? So because the name might be a bit misleading, we hear a lot from people that when they hear the name OPC Router, they first think that it only can communicate via OPCs, so that it needs OPC data as a data source or a data target. Or they think about when they hear router or router that it's a hardware gateway solution, and both is not the case. Maybe the name really is a bit misleading, but it's coming from a history. It's a mature product which is now 15 years under development. And in the beginning, one of the main protocols have, of course, been OPC. So OPC Router still can speak OPC. It can act as an OPC client and also as an OPC server to transfer data, but it can also connect to any other kind of system. Can be automation systems like printers or RFID systems or PLCs, and can also connect to top floor systems like databases, cloud systems, ERP solutions, and so on. So OPC Router is not a hardware solution. It's a software-based communication platform which can be installed on a server, on a physical machine, on a PC, and it offers a lot of available plugins to connect totally different kind of systems. What makes OPC Router special? Of course, this kinds of middleware solutions or communication solutions. Please make sure that you all mute your microphones just to not to disturb the session here. So the special value that OPC Router adds as a middleware is, of course, that it automatically transfers data. So it decreases the risk of manual mistakes, and it increases data transfer, which will run automatically. So that's what OPC Router does. But what makes OPC Router special are, from my perspective, from my personal perspective, two main points. The first point is the ease of use, because OPC Router is offering a graphical user interface. Or even if that today's topic is about scripting, where you need to touch the keyboard, for standard connections between different systems, you don't need to script. You can use the graphical user interface and create connections between different kinds of systems just via drag and drop, just using the mouse. So you don't need to have any special education to be able to, for example, connect a PLC with your ERP or SAP system. So you don't need to be an SAP expert and you don't need to be a PLC expert to do so. So this makes OPC Router, from my perspective, very, very special and easy to use. And the second point, which is very unique today, is there are several kinds of middleware and communication solutions out there, in hardware-based and software-based solutions. But OPC Router, I think, offers by far the most available plugins, focusing on automation systems, IT systems. So it cannot only speak, let's say, REST, OPC, and SQL. It supports more than 40 different kinds of protocols and systems, and enables you to use only one software solution for all your automated data transfers. Just to give you an idea how this could look like, so this is a very easy picture, not showing all of the available plugins, but you can imagine what kind of connections you can create. So for example, you can communicate with field systems like PLCs, sensors, controllers, with databases. So still a very often used easy use case, getting data out of the shop floor, storing the data in a database, and then maybe using that data for analyzing tools or reporting tools afterwards. Very, very simple use case. But what you also can do, because of the availability and the high amount of plugins, is you can connect your PLC with your ERP system, get a new production order automatically transferred to the PLC as soon as the previous production order has been finished. The PLC can give a handshake back to the ERP system, telling the ERP system that the data has been successfully transferred and that the production now starts. When the production has been started, there might be a printer somewhere, maybe at the packaging line. So the PLC can send data to that printer in the same process. It could be, for example, that the printer is having an issue because it's running out of ribbon, because it's running out of ink, because it's running out of labels, or simply that the connection to the printer has failed for any reason. An OPC Router also could recognize that and then automatically send out emails or Telegram messenger notifications to the maintenance team, informing them that there's an issue with the printer. So all these kinds of bidirectional communications can happen in parallel at the same time. And that's mainly what OPC Router does. So that's it for the introduction part from my side. And I would like now to hand over to Jan, who will introduce you to the capabilities of scripting and usage of scripts inside of OPC Router, which will enable you to do even more than the standard plugins allow you to do.
All right, yeah, thank you, Thorsten. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. So we'll directly start sharing my screen. So everybody should now see the OPC Router configuration.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, as always, just as a beginning, OPC Router configuration. For those who are new to the topic, the OPC Router is divided into two parts, basically. The configuration where you administrate all your plugins and where you create connections. And on the other hand, the OPC Router runtime, which is running as a Windows service that actually executes connections. So on the very top, you have some options where you can influence the behavior or configure the OPC router. Important maybe when you start using it, you may want to check this show transfer steps. So that gives you the information in which order your connection objects are executed. Other than that, there are certainly some interesting points here, but we will skip that today. For actually using OPC router, the icons on the very left side here are most important. So when I hit the puzzle icon here, I get a list of all available plugins. Today we will focus on the scripting. During the webinar, we will go through these steps here, so you will learn how to use them. Basically, that's how you operate OPC router in everyday practice. But yeah, scripting is our topic today. Our development implemented a script module because sometimes there is the need to make your own customized functionality, so to add your customized functionalities to OPC router. So they implemented two ways of scripting, or two different kinds. The first one is a transfer object. This is when you build a connection and you have transfer objects using the ones here on the right side. You can have connection lines into a transfer object and then out of a transfer object to the following. So that's where you use transfer objects within a connection. And the next one would be trigger scripts. That is on the very right hand. When I scroll down, I have the trigger sections. And that's basically defining an event that executes a connection. If those two interfaces aren't enough for you, there still is the possibility to program your own devices or plugins on the left hand. This would be done by our development team. So in case you're interested in developing OPC router plugins yourself, please contact us and we will arrange it. But the scripting already gives you a lot of functionalities. I don't have a real world concrete whole project, but will give you an overview about all the functionalities that are provided here and that you can use in order to solve your problems in case the functionality of OPC router isn't enough. So I will now start showing you the trigger scripts. When you hit the scripts, you have two tabs here where you can create your scripts. So this one now is empty. You can always store a script, transfer it, and import it again. That's interesting. And now I will just create a new one, and I just call it my trigger. And it's of type trigger. When you do that, a basic editor opens. So gives you some functionality. Actually, this is an interface, a type of interface. And everything is programmed in C#. The editor starts with supplying three methods. The first one is the initialize method. So this
Hi, Jan, we cannot hear you anymore. Maybe somebody muted you.
I was muted. I hope it wasn't too long. So you hear me again, right?
Yes, now it works again.
Okay, so there are three methods supplied. The first one is the initialize method. It would define the query interval, so how often your trigger conditions are checked in the check trigger method, that's where you define the logic, whether a connection is, whether a trigger fires or not. And the third one is a reset function. Very often when you read a value, for example, a Boolean value from an OPC server, when that one is true, you want to set it back to false. Otherwise, your connection would constantly trigger. So first of all, I will just change the query interval to 1000. That makes it a little bit more easy to follow the data flow. So besides those three methods, you have some settings up here. In every script, you have the possibility to reference third-party assemblies as well as .NET assemblies. We will do that also in a later example. You always can define parameters that are necessary in order to have inputs to a transfer script or to a trigger in this case. And very important on the very right side here, the development supplies some ready-to-use methods. In this case, for either reading or writing OPC data from an OPC server, or variables, can be local or global variables with an OPC router. There are some logging functionalities provided, and then the parameter sections. So you don't have to program your own functionality to connect to an OPC server and read data and write data, but you can directly use the provided functions here. So for example, if I want to read a Boolean value from an OPC server and trigger a connection when that one is true, I can go here and when I double click, or first of all, when I do a mouse over, it gives you a tooltip about the method. First of all, what kind it is, what parameter it expects, and the return value. So when I double click it, it adds the code here in the check trigger function. This is where you define the logic. And it requires two parameters, the item path and the OPC server name. So whenever your conditions or your programming is done, this method returns either true or false. When it returns true, your connection is triggered. And after that, it automatically calls the reset trigger method down here. So the first example would be a very simple one. I will now read a Boolean value from an OPC server, from the Kepler OPC server actually. So I can just quickly go here. I do need always, when I use the methods on the right side, to convert to the destination data type, because it's always an object that you get in return. So all values, irrespective of read or read multiple, also variables, are of type data type object. So this method returns a Boolean, so I need to always convert to the respective data type. In this type, in this case, it's return or convert to Boolean. So that would be the easiest way. I read an OPC value and directly put it in after the return. So now I can also directly, since it's two strings, type in two strings here, but I will use parameters just to show you how to use them for each example. So under settings, I define two parameters. I get the same name, so I don't have to change it. Type is string, so I don't have to change it here. And the OPC server name. Server name. So now when I save it, which you have to do, it gives me a response down here. And when I compile it, it gives me compiling successful. So this script is ready to use. When I close the editor, I can use that trigger. And that is done using connections. On the very left hand, we have the three arrows here where you create your connections. So first of all, I will do a folder trigger. Within that folder, I create a connection using the icons here or right click. And my trigger example, maybe. So script types, the first one would be transfer object. This is under transfer objects, but I'm using a trigger. So I scroll down to triggers and choose my script trigger. And when I double click it, I can choose from all design triggers. I only have one at the moment. And here's where I define the parameters. So I prepared one pass to the OPC server where I have a Boolean here. And that's the item pass to it that I have to type in. So I choose the namespace and put it in here. And the OPC server name is the one that you specified within OPC Router Configuration. So I'm using OPC UA communication, and my in the plugin settings for the OPC UA client, I specified a connection to an OPC server and gave it a name. So this name is the one that the method requires. Yeah, and then just to show you how it works, I will now transfer some data so that we see something quickly. Let me quickly put it. Item path. What is it again? OPC server name. So that's my connection. And since I don't reset the trigger, it will trigger every second now. So that's basically it. I go here, activate my connection. This is where I pass it over to the runtime, OPC Router runtime. Say productive. And yes. So whenever you do changes to a script, you need to restart the service. And then looking at the Windows OPC Router runtime, that connection will be loaded at some point. And ready to use. So I don't have an error. So if I go to the OPC quick client to set my Boolean variable to 0, it will constantly fire my connection. So it's not reset to 0. And now it's constantly every second because that's the defined query interval. I can change that when I go back to into my connection. I can double click on the transfer object and open the editor as a sort of shortcut. So once it's 0, it triggers. Oh, let me quickly put that to false. And I have the reset trigger method. So I go here, OPC access, write single. Item pass and OPC server name is the same. Value to write is of type object, so I put a 0 here. I save, compiling error, so it requires a semicolon in C# specific code. So compiling successful. Now I have to reactivate again. Yeah, and so once it's initialized, that's the case, I can go here, write a true to my Boolean variable. Then it's reset by OPC Router directly, and we only have one transfer here. So that would be the first basic example. When I go back to scripts, what you also can do is, in this case, for example, I will now have two conditions based on an evaluation. So I define a local variable and read the value from it for it. I also define an integer value. I read it again from read single, same OPC server, different paths, because I want to read an integer value. So quickly do the convert here. So, and the integer value has a different path. Yeah, and then when I've read both values, I can do some evaluation, some logical evaluation. So I don't know if it requires an else, but I will put return false for all code path. So, and here's the logic that I define in order whether a trigger should fire or not. So I can say if int trigger is exactly 42 and the bool trigger is set to true, fire my connection. Otherwise, don't do anything. I will then reset my OPC value for pass 2, that's the integer value, and it give it a 0.2. So I have two conditions that have to be true. So there's one error here. Oh, okay. Then this is the command in C#. And I need a semicolon. So at some point, okay, the parameter, I need to define it here. So now I have the second parameter, type string as well. And compiling successful. So now I can use it. So when I go back to my connection, I need to specify the path. And here I copy paste it quickly because I have an integer 32 defined in the same path trigger. So when I activate it, yes. I can see it here in the status. And yeah, now it's ready. So I have to do both. First, the Boolean, when I set to 1, then nothing happens. And there's no transfer at this point of time. And now I set the long 1 to 42. And then it's true, and both are reset, and we have one trigger. Okay, I'm not in live mode, but one trigger at 31. So that's an AND condition. This is already, doable with basic functionalities. So you can also, and I will give you another example. I defined a variable here in the settings called router bool variable that is always false by default. And now I want to read that value too. So the next possibility that is provided by our developers is not only OPC access, but variable access. You can have global variables. They are valid throughout OPC router for all connections, or local variables. They are only valid within one connection. There's no difference but here, so I'm using a global variable. and I want to read it. So if I double click it, I put it also first. I don't have to, but I put it into a local variable. Bool router variable or whatever. And here I also have to do the convert, since I'm always getting objects in return. So now I'm reading that variable, and the variable name is exactly the same as I have specified here. So I copy it. I could use another parameter, but I just do a string here. The method requires a string, and that's what I give it. So saving, compiling successful. Now I can do something like this, a more complex logical condition. So either those two here are true, or the bool router variable is set to true. So see if that's correct. Compiling successful. So when I go back here to my connection, I will set the router variable to true and trigger it. The trigger will then trigger all the time unless I reset the variable here, but I can quickly do that too. That's just some. Then I write it down here. So it's the router bool variable, and the value is 0. Is that right? Yeah. So, and there's always the semicolon. Save, compile. Okay. So I would quickly make a connection. Set router variable to true. And that is a constant and my variable. So this is true. I define it not to be a string, but a Boolean. And my variable is, of course, my router Boolean variable. When I triggered this connection, this one gets true. My trigger should fire because it's an OR condition, and reset the variable to 0 again. So I go productive. And when I trigger my connection, it gets true, and also my connection gets true, and I have another trigger, another transfer. And the router variable is set to 0 again. So following up, we do have assembly references. We have parameters, always, irrespective of trigger or transfer object script. We have the 3 methods here, also with a description. And we have some helpful methods supplied for variable access and OPC access. So you can ready to use methods. Also some logging. When it comes to real world projects, you need to log stuff. For example, I can simply use the log method here. The message type is not every time, but when an error happens, error there. So the message type is error, only then the method is called, and then I can give a message here. My value here is, for example, and then give it a plus, and then the integer trigger value, for example. So this information would now be logged in case of an error to the OPC router log, and you can go through the log and see what's happening. You can compare values and so on. So also logging is interesting. So keep that in mind. And the last one would be parameters. Yeah, we saw that, and we'll use that throughout the webinar. So that's the tools you have. So for the first example, trigger, I'm done, and I would now go to the next step. In case there are no questions, otherwise, please ask your questions.
I have one question. What is the OPC node kind in the OPC access?
Oh yeah, that's a new one. I will have to ask the developers. That's where you can, I think, check values of an OPC type, what data type it is. So yeah, but I don't know how to use it at the moment, so we'll have to answer per email. Good. So triggers. Yeah, maybe. The next example is transfer objects, and there are some browsing functionality supplied. What I do is I create a script called browse of type transfer object, of course. And here you have also the same, basically. You have assembly references, parameters, and the methods that you already saw. The methods also, we have an initialize method. It's only called once upon router start for constant values or whatever. You can use it, connection strings. And then you have the write method. This method is called when there are parameters passed into this transfer object. Then this method is executed by OPC router. Sometimes there are no input parameters to a transfer object. For example, if the script is in the first place of a connection. In that case, you would use the method down here. But that's it. And I will show you the browsing functionality. So that is here, the method. That is supplied by an example in the manual. So I just copy pasted it. This is the part that you can literally copy paste from the manual. And then there are some steps to take. So first of all, of course, item path and server name. The browsing gives you the chance to go to a certain tag group, and then in return, give all the items in that tag group with some information to them. So I will browse all items you see on the right side here in cap server X from the K register. Data type examples. And as I said, first of all, parameters as always. So I have the item path. So I have to define parameters. It's not an array. It's type of string, and it's an input parameter. So parameters are a little more complex because you have values coming into a transfer object and going out of it. But otherwise it's the same. So you can have arrays and the direction. And of course the server name. This is typical application for it. And then you have to remember that its link is used here. So this is not a third-party reference that we make, but the first example is an assembly reference to another .NET library. So this would be, in order to use the syntax that the developers used, you need to reference the system core, DLL. And in another step, you need to go and use the namespace of link because they used link syntax. So it reads from a certain path all variables from a certain server. In return, gives you an array of type, specific type. And this type is string, 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 and Boolean. So I referenced link. I I added the namespace. Now I need to add here the output parameters. So I get in return an array of type string. So this would be an array, string of course, and output. I have the node kind array given by the programmers. Of course, it's array and output. I have the identifier and its output. And there has children, which is an array too, but is of type Boolean. So you know that from the menu and its output. So those 4 arrays are now defined in the respective data type as output parameters. So I can just compile and it works. And now I can use the transfer object. So I will create a connection, browse. And of course, I need a script here and some constants for the parameters. So I have my script. Okay, I have this server name set to both, but that should work too. You can have arrays filling them up when you pass them to the script. So, and then use them at the same time at output parameters. So that should still work. So my item path will be, I can browse it quickly. The K register. Here. So in this case, I choose the multi-change trigger, so I don't have to type it. And then have the data type examples, K register, and I apply it. So I can quickly copy it and put it here. And my server name, of course, is again cap server exua. And now I can put it the item path and the cap server ex. And then I quickly write it to a CSV here, or just use variables to depict the content. So you see, I have a display name and a node kind, identifier, and has children. So I trigger it manually. No, here. So then I manually trigger it, and it gives some parameters into the script. The script does its job, and then in return you get 4 output arrays. So you know the data type, you know what object type in after OPC UA specification it is. You have the namespace, the path to it, and the values to it. So the browse functionality gives you a lot of good possibility for dynamic actions. So that's why I showed it. Please remember the reference to system core and the using namespace of link. Otherwise, it's copy paste. So the next example is then another transfer object. So I can have of type example. Because I can have transfer object and then using the browse functionality. For example, I can have an OPC access of read multiple. And here I read a whole list of items. There are some steps necessary for that. So you first have to specify a list. And then you pass that list to the read multiple function, and in return you get the values. So when I make a mouse over here, it gives me it says me I need a dictionary that I get in return, and the read multiple method requires a list of type string and the OPC server name. So I will then start defining a list of type string. That would be the name item names. Then I have to add values to it. So this would be, for example, yeah, a value from an OPC server. So I will choose maybe two the longs here. So this is of type string, so I have to define it as a string. Quickly see. Okay, that's okay. So, and then I will quickly add other parameters. But this could be also, for example, when browsing, in return, I get a list of all parameters or OPC items from a specific path. So I can populate that list using the array and loop that array and add the content of the array here. So that would be perfectly combinable with browsing functionality. And then I make it another or third one. So there are 3 items to be read from an OPC server defined in that list. Now I need to define my dictionary. So there's a functionality or an object type of called dictionary in .NET. Here is of type string and object. This is, you have a dictionary that contains a name in this case and a value. So the name would be the name of the OPC item and the value, of course. That's the functionality of it. And I say new dictionary. Yeah. Once it's defined, I can use it. So my dictionary is called OPC data, and the return value of that method is a dictionary. So I can store it in my local dictionary. And I pass the list of item names and an OPC server name. OPC server name will then quickly be string input. And then finally, you can go through it, create arrays from it or whatever. I will quickly do an output so we see it. Output array values. That is an array of type object and output. So my output array, I choose all the values from my dictionary to put into it. So that is OPC data dot values. To array. And so dann habe ich das nicht hier. Like this. So let me compile. Here again, I think I need the core again. So not sure if this is the case. Then I have a typing error here. So now it's, yeah, done. So I create a list, could also use browsing to populate it, or get an array back from it automatically, define a local dictionary, and then use my my local dictionary to get the return value of that read multiple method. And then I just define an output array to use it for a stop procedure or whatever. So yeah, that should be okay. So now I create quickly a connection. And of course, this is a script and constant. Server. And then I will just choose a variable to, or maybe it's an object, but nevertheless, I always only use object data types as output parameter because OPC router can do the transfer for you. So don't have enough time. So the original example I prepared was for more information. So you can use the browse functionality to give the name of an OPC item. This is the display name, the value type or data type, and the value itself. And all would be of type object. In my stored procedure, they are different types, but that doesn't matter. OPC router does the conversion for you. So basically, you can always choose object as output values. Well, now my management studio doesn't really work. So I will quickly. So now when it's done, it's not. So the values, each value is of type object, but it's passed to the stored procedure. So it can be done with output parameters of type object. So in this case, I have an array of 3 elements. So OPC router calls the database stored procedure 3 times. Actually, yeah, that would be the example of transfer objects when it comes to read multiple. So there is an example in the menu for it. So the 2 steps: list dictionary, populate dictionary, and then do whatever with it is yeah, also in the manual. So I'm a little bit late, but unfortunately I have another example. So the last example is referencing your own DLL. So we saw you can reference .NET libraries. That's nice and necessary, but you can also create your own DLLs, or more or less you get an API from a third party, a machine vendor. That happens sometimes, and there are some steps. So when I create a new one and I say assembly example. The first step would then be, of course, the assembly itself. So I created a little DLL, just a C# class library DLL. It has 4 member values, member variables, class member. It has a method defined that can add 2 numbers, and then a void method. When I call it, it would do some simulation values, create the simulation values and assign it to the class members. So a very simple one, but the ways the steps to take are, first of all, where's the DLL located? So you can reference local DLLs in assembly references. I'm using the namespace production data. So I tell OPC router the same. And then wherever you need it, but I will do the instance of my class machine data in my interface class. So I have it available throughout the whole class. So I have machine data and then M.A.C data. And I have no constructor, just the class. So now when I save it, I can go to any method here and use it. So the first example would be add 2 numbers. So I will quickly have again an OPC server name. Oh no, we did just 2 OPC values, that is faster. So I add 2 numbers of amounts from 2 machines. So amount 1 of type double, because that's what the method wants as input, and the amount 2. And its input. So now I can just use my M.A.C data and call the method add 2 numbers. Is that right? Yes. And then I supply the 2 input parameters. This is amount 1 here from 1 machine, let's say, and then amount 2. And okay, of course, the output parameter. Sum produced of type double and output. Because in return I get a double. And of course, then I have 4 parameter class members here. So current state, temperature, amount, and scrap. I quickly finished that example then here. So I want to use them in another transfer object later. So I have to make output parameters. Let's say double current scrap. And this one is in 32. And then I simply assign them here. Current amount equals M.A.C data current amount and current scrap. Yeah. So I make a mistake, then okay, mount. Okay, mistyped it. That's true. Ah, that's true. Couldn't state. So now I can use it. Yeah, I want to make a new one. Assembly. So I need OPC values and my script. So I have my simulated machines here. Take the current produced amount and then choose my assembly script and the amount, and then I will, in this case, use variables again to depict the outcome. And let that trigger. Yeah, so now it's just summing up two values coming in, and then starts counting or giving you a state. Actually, I forgot something to trigger the counting, so the simulator. So when I go here, I have to start the simulator void method. So mach data, and I think machine simulator is the method that starts the simulator. Yeah. So, and when I start the simulator, then it produces values. But yeah, that's just. So every 2 seconds now, and then it's counting up and simulating. So you can, yeah, when you call the right method, then it works. And yeah, that would be an example how to use your own DLL or a third-party DLL. So yeah, we're a little late, but sorry for that. But I think we are done then so far, and I will hand over back to Thorsten.
Thank you very much, Jan. I think it was worth it because all people stayed in the session, so it seems to be of interest for everybody. Thank you very much for joining. I will just show you another slide. Let's see how I can get back to my presentation. I don't know. So there it is. Yeah, the only thing I have left to say is that we are almost through with all the OPC Router training webinars for this year. We already planned a new webinar series for next year. You will find them on our website soon. The one webinar which is left for this year will be on December 10th about working with the email and Telegram plugin. So if you would like to send out notifications automatically, this could be your webinar. And yeah, last thing to say is thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your interest. If you should have any questions regarding OPC Router or regarding scripting with OPC Router, please don't hesitate to have a look at our international distributors website. So under opc-router.com, international distributors, you will find the list of all our global partners. And please don't hesitate to contact your local partner with your questions and needs you should have. Any other questions? Also, if you would like to have a recording of today's session, please just shoot us a quick email at sales@inray.de and we will be happy to answer them as soon as possible. Thank you very much once again for your participation. We are wishing you a very good day, a nice day, a nice remainder of the week, and of course to stay healthy in these crazy times. We will stop the recording now, and yeah, thank you once again. Bye bye. Have a good time.
Thank you. Bye bye.